Self-care is actually not self-indulgence or play or any of those things, which I think a lot of times we see self-care as, I don't know, massages and spa days, which is also nice, but it doesn't exactly hit all of it on the head. Basically, good self-care is anything we do that really responds to the challenges of life. The pressures we're under, the challenges we're going through, the self-care would sort of match those challenges, match those pressures. So, I use a silly analogy. When our dishwasher gave out a couple of weeks ago, the first thing we did is call a repairman because, of course, you need a dishwasher. And that's really, in a sense, what we need to be thinking about with our own self-care. Is as soon as I know something isn't going well, or I'm dealing with something, or that I've got something on my plate, I want to be able to match that with something I am doing that is going to end up easing that or soothing me in some important way. So good self-care actually has an effect. In other words, if I'm doing something that actually works, I'm going to notice that maybe my emotion is eased, or the pressure feels better, or I feel less overwhelmed, something along those lines. So it's going to obviously move you through emotion. It's going to clarify a direction that you're going in. It's going to manage your problem. It's going to ease your stress level. And that's what a good self-care does. Ultimately, there's foundational self-care, and that's something you're going to do every single day. And you would want to integrate these into your life always, so that you're holding your own feet to the fire, as we say. So that type of self-care is what we talked about very often, which is we really need to prioritize our sleep. We need to make sure that that's something that we are working on every day to get better and better at. We want to make sure that we're eating in a healthy way. Very often when we're trying to buy some energy, we will start eating crappy food, which is a pretty typical thing for all of us. And so it's usually a good indicator that I'm not sleeping well. But if I eat well, it's interesting, it does tend to affect our sleep. And also the third one, which is really good movement every single day. Exercise is an interesting one because it is one of the few things we can do that actually does give us another chemical reaction. And exercise gives us the opposite chemical reaction as stress does. So it actually shuts down the production of the crappy stress chemicals and turns on the production of some really nice soothing chemicals. So it's one that we would want to do. And then also stress management strategies, which are going to, again, be unique to your own needs and to your own stressors. But those are things usually based on your regular stress. So I'm going to have to, if I have a normal amount of stress in my life, I should have certain amounts of stress self-care that I'm implementing in my life nearly daily in order to counter those stress levels. So some ideas for regular stress management are things like meditation or mindfulness. People like to have rituals with their family, like family dinner, or some people have breakfast together. I know some firefighter families that's their transition ritual, that when they come back after a shift, that they always have breakfast with their family, which is very lovely. And then also regular connection with each other is something that we would usually put in this foundational. In other words, I am nurturing my friendships. I'm making sure I connect with my family. I'm making sure that I may have some kind of connections to the bigger community, either whether it's through a religious path or through some kind of spiritual path, things like that. And even volunteering, quite frankly. Targeted self-care, on the other hand, is if you would kind of picture a big closet and it's got lots of shelves and bins and bags and little whatevers, drawers that you can pull out and you're going to utilize for specific needs. So some examples of that would be, let's say you have a problem at work. And as a result of that problem at work, first you pull out the kind of little drawer, talk to a friend, and that friend always gives really good advice. So you feel like, okay, I got somewhere with that. Then maybe you're going to sit down a little bit later and you're going to write down some of your thoughts. Maybe you're going to do a pro and con list. You're going to sort of figure out a way to work that through. And then maybe later on you're going to take a long walk to think through that pro-con list that you just wrote. So all of those are forms of self-care, because what you're trying to do is move that problem at work forward to come up with what you're going to do next, what you're going to do to manage it in some way. So again, good self-care moves an issue forward. You also want to, obviously some of the easy ones are, we all want to have some kind of strategies to examine our thinking. Our thinking can be sometimes part of the problem, and other times a really huge part of our solution. And so we want to be able to have an ability to go inside our own mind and understand our thinking and how it's actually contributing to our stressors or could contribute to our self-care. We also obviously want to know when our thinking is hurting us versus helping us. And then lastly, just kind of as a subset of this kind of targeted self-care, for most of us throughout our life, we've come up with some strategies how to deal with specific emotions, and those are actually our emotion self-care. So if, for example, most of us have a strategy for sad, or we have a strategy for angry. I personally don't talk when I'm angry because it's going to be, I just don't feel like that's a wise thing, so I tend to time out. And I'm going to get myself recentered, and I'm going to get myself calmed down, and then I'm going to come out and talk. So all of us have to come up with the ones that work, and then we do want to evaluate when they don't work. For example, I hear very frequently about people who will sometimes turn to alcohol as a way of caring. Well, first of all, again, by definition, it does not move you through your problem, because when you come to, your problem is the exact same size and maybe hopefully not bigger than before you started drinking. So drinking is not a good self-care strategy at all. It isn't one. And the same thing with sometimes really high levels of avoidance, where you're sitting and playing video games for several hours, which I get why that's such a draw, but it isn't, again, moving the problem forward, and we want to be able to do that. Enough self-care is, you basically have just an overall feeling of higher functioning. You will notice that your stress level feels like it's very manageable. You'll often get responses and comments from other people like, wow, you look really good, or you look really happy, because we're coping with life. We feel like we have life by the tail, as opposed to usually when we are doing a poor job of self-care is we don't feel that way. We feel so behind. We feel like we're chasing things all of the time. And so you're going to just have this overall feeling of better well-being.